Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Kathryn Hansen. I'm the author of Brain Over Binge and the Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide. And before I get into the topic of this episode, I want to tell you about a free resource that will give you some daily motivation as you recover and keep you focused on some of the main concepts that I teach in this podcast. The resource is my 31-day Brain Over Binge Inspiration Booklet, which you can get through the link in the show description. And there you'll also find all of the other Brain Over Binge resources as well. Today's topic, in the spirit of releasing this on Valentine's Day in the US and other parts of the world, will deal with relationships. Our relationship with food, ourselves, and others. If you're listening, you know that having a difficult relationship with food affects nearly every other relationship in your life, including your relationship with yourself, because it tends to erode self-trust, self-confidence, and usually brings high levels of shame. Eating disorders are extremely isolating, causing you to turn away from other people, even people you love the most and who love you the most. Because of the shame associated with your behaviors, you may find yourself lying to those you love about your eating, or hiding food, or hiding the evidence of food, and also hiding your purging or exercise behaviors from people in your life. Your drive to binge and your obsessive food thoughts can drive you away from connection and can distract you from being present with the most important people in your life. The isolation of the eating disorder can make you not want to reach out to friends. It can cause you to shy away from social events or dating or any sort of intimate or romantic relationship. The connection between eating disorders and relationships is multifaceted, and as I was reflecting on this topic and coming up with points to address, I realized there's so much more than I can tackle in one episode. So this episode is going to be a part 1, and there will definitely be a part 2, and maybe even a part 3 or 4 down the road if the ideas keep flowing. As you listen to these episodes addressing relationships, know that each person and each relationship is different. So please take what is useful to you and what resonates with you, and leave the rest. I'm going to address some issues you may be facing in your life now or that may come up in the future as you heal your relationship with food. I'm going to share some of my own experience in the area of relationships along the way with the hope that it helps you see that you're not alone. An important initial point I want to make as I embark on discussing healing your relationship with food, yourself, and others is that it pretty much needs to go in that order, or at least healing your relationship with food has to be the priority in eating disorder recovery. Of course, you can work on your issues with food while you also work on yourself and your relationship with others if you want, but it's so hard to resolve issues in those other relationships and with yourself when you're in the midst of what can feel like an all-consuming survival battle with food. To illustrate this, I'm going to briefly talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'll explain how all of this comes into play with what I'm talking about. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a very well-known psychological concept that explains our human motivations. Maslow talked about there being 5 tiers or levels of human needs, and these levels are usually depicted as one on top of the other within a pyramid. At the base and the biggest part of the pyramid are our basic physiological needs like breathing, food, water, shelter, warmth, and sleep. This is the foundation that must be relatively stable in order for us to pursue our other motivations or our higher needs. The next level is safety needs, which is the need for security, stability, and protection from danger or harm. The third level is social needs, which includes the need for love, affection, belonging, and social interaction. The fourth level is esteem needs. These include the need for self-esteem, achievement, recognition, and respect from others. The last level is self-actualization, which is the need for personal growth, fulfillment, and the realization of one's full potential. Now, these levels, beyond the basic physical needs, aren't completely fixed, and they can operate simultaneously at times. But the basic premise is that we can't focus on more meaningful things in life, like improving our relationship with ourselves and others, until our basic physiological and safety needs are met. And an eating disorder strongly interferes with physiological and safety needs. When you're restricting food, your body and brain are operating from a primal survival state, and you don't have the mental, emotional, or physical bandwidth to pursue more meaningful things in your life. And when you're hooked on the terrible habit of binge eating, your brain becomes conditioned to operate as if binge eating is a basic survival need. So that when the binge urges are operating, it's hard to focus on anything else because you feel like one of your basic needs isn't being met. And of course, we know that binge eating is not a real need, like a need for a normal amount of food. But the point is that in the moment that you're feeling that drive to binge, it can feel like a real need. I think this is a big part of why it can feel so tempting to just binge to make the urges and all of those cravings go away. There's this illusion that if you can just get the urge to stop, you can get back to the rest of your life and focus on what's important to you. I know this was one of my common motivations for binging, and I know you probably can relate to this as well. But when you think about it, that's actually the opposite of what happens when you act on the urge. When you just go ahead and binge to try to get rid of the urge, you create a whole new set of problems for yourself, which are worse than the urge itself. Acting on an urge to binge is not like acting on an urge to drink water when you're really thirsty. When you have that need for water and you're therefore unable to focus on anything else in your life, then drinking that big glass of water will make you feel so much better afterward, and like you can function normally again and focus on what's important to you. But with binge eating or another bad habit or addiction, instead of feeling better after following the urge, you feel absolutely terrible, and you're usually much less able to focus on the rest of your life. Eating disorders also interfere with that second level of needs in Maslow's hierarchy. Restricting food, binging on food, and having other obsessive or compulsive behaviors around food affect our basic needs for safety and security. When you have an eating disorder, there can be a great deal of fear around food. There can be a fear of the binge eating itself. There can be dangerous health issues. Plus, there can just be a lot of unpredictability in your day-to-day life based on whether or not you binge. And there can be a lack of self-trust that also creates a lack of stability and safety within yourself. All of this is to say that when your relationship with food is off, it creates a situation where your fundamental physiological and safety needs are not being met, and it becomes so incredibly challenging to focus on your relationship with yourself and others. This is another reason why I strongly believe that the advice to try to fix the rest of your life and heal your self-esteem and your relationships and find fulfillment as a remedy to stop binge eating has it backwards in most cases. How can you possibly focus on those higher needs for fulfillment and connection and love and belonging and meaning when your basic needs aren't being met because of the eating disorder? I wrote a lot about this in Brain Over Binge as far as my experience in eating disorder therapy, trying to address deeper issues within myself and with my emotions and my relationships and my self-esteem. And all of that not only did not help me stop binge eating, but I felt like much of the time I had a fundamental inability to actually focus on those things and work on them in the way that my therapist wanted. And looking back, this only made sense, because the issues with eating were consuming my mind and body's resources. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs provides another framework to explain why that was the case. Now, with all of that being said, people with eating disorders don't just completely shut off from the rest of the world and from relationships with others and with themselves. People with eating disorders do manage to have friends, romantic partners, successful careers, creative pursuits, and fulfillment in other areas. But if you have or you've had an eating disorder, you know how challenging this can be. And you know that sometimes you feel like you're leading a double life. It can be like going in and out of feeling like you're in basic survival mode, consumed by your desire to restrict, binge, purge, overexercise, or obsess about food, and then in other moments feeling relatively normal and being able to pursue those higher needs and goals. When I had binge-free days, I would feel like I was going up that pyramid of needs. I was able to spend quality time with the people I cared about. I was able to pursue romantic relationships, and I could engage in some personal growth, only to be thrown back down to that lower level again when the urges to binge arose. And to kind of bring this into real life, I want to share an example of this from college. It involves dating, and this is something I briefly wrote about in Brain Over Binge. There was a guy I was dating in my last year of college who I ended up confiding in about my eating disorder because my therapist at the time was encouraging me to do that to get support from people in my life. And as a bit of an aside, looking back, I realized that although he was great in many ways, he probably wasn't the right person to confide in because I don't think he necessarily wanted a true, deep, emotional connection with me. I think he was just trying to have fun, and to be honest, probably wanted things to progress to a sexual relationship as well. Now, as more of an aside, this was definitely the opposite of my motivation for dating at this time. In fact, sex and physical intimacy was something I very much tried to avoid during my eating disorder, primarily because of the deep, deep shame and disgust I felt toward my body from all the binging. Well, there was that, sprinkled in with some guilt from my Catholic upbringing, but maybe that's a story for another day. And I also want to talk more about the relationship between sex and eating disorders in a later episode because I'm getting a little off track here. But the point of this story is that by dating this guy in college, I was trying to meet some of those higher needs for connection, belonging, and even love. But all too often, I got sucked right back into the world of binging. So this guy I'm talking about, who I gave the name David in the book, which was actually not his real name, we had a good time together for the maybe 4 or 5 months that we dated. We did some fun outdoor things that I love, like hiking, canoeing, and water skiing. We also went to restaurants, we went to a few concerts, we went to the movies, we hung out at each other's apartments, and it was good in those moments. But there was another side to it. If I was binging or feeling sick from binging or exercising all day to try to purge, I would make up excuses not to see him. And this happened a lot. I do remember one time that I reluctantly agreed to see him anyway after a binge, just to go shopping, and I can remember wearing really baggy clothes to hide my bloating, and I remember not wanting to look at him in the eyes because my face was so swollen from all the food and water retention, and this was something that definitely happened after most of my binges. I can still remember walking around this store in my baggy clothes, looking down, trying to make awkward conversation through my shame, and I felt so relieved when I got back in my car and drove away. Shortly before we broke up, he took me to his family home for the night, which was a bit of a drive away from our college. That night, an urge to binge overtook me, and I snuck out of the room where I was staying, and I ate a large amount of cookies from this big tub of them that was in his kitchen. I did manage some semblance of self-control, and I ate an amount that I didn't think anyone would notice, or at least that's what I told myself. But the next day, we were in the living room, and his mom was in the kitchen, which was adjacent to the living room, and she definitely noticed. My mind's a little fuzzy as far as exactly what she said, but I remember her opening it and expressing some frustration and confusion about who ate them. I just sat there feeling frozen and so ashamed, and I didn't say anything to David or his mom. I was just embarrassed and bloated and so uncomfortable on the drive back to college later that evening, and I broke up with him not long after that. It probably would not have worked out anyway because of some differences, but I definitely blame the eating disorder for the breakup. I did not say that directly to him, but in my mind, I told myself that I just could not be with someone if I was going to have to hide my shame from them, or not be able to be intimate, or cancel fun activities, or not be able to look them in the eyes because of face swelling, or eat all of their family's cookies in the middle of the night. And I do laugh a little now about the cookie story so many years later, because I think what a great first and last impression I must have made on his family. But it definitely wasn't funny at the time, and I know many of you listening can relate to doing things you're not proud of when you're under the influence of an urge to binge. Like I mentioned, I had told David about my eating disorder probably about a month before we broke up, and he was not very sensitive about it just due to a lack of understanding and him being a college guy just wanting to have fun. When I tried explaining the binge eating to him and told him that's why I had canceled some dates and plans, he asked me sarcastically, "So you'd rather eat chocolate cake than be with me?" And I remember feeling so foolish in that moment, and I shared this in Brain Over Binge, but even though his comment was very insensitive, there was some truth in it. Yes, when the urges to binge hit, I definitely would have chosen to eat cake or a tub of cookies over being with him. Those were the times I was not able to focus on any of my higher needs or have the capacity to be present with another person. It was this constant swinging back and forth between normal life and the nightmare of the binge eating habit. And it was so frustrating to have my relationship with food interfere with any relationship I tried to develop, including a relationship with myself. There wasn't something fundamentally wrong with me in the area of relationships, even though, like the rest of the population, I had so much to learn then, and even still I have so much to learn and work on in the area of relationships so many years later. I definitely thought something was wrong with me, but now that I look back, I can see that I was just temporarily distracted and consumed by the food, and I know that so many of you can relate. This is where I'm going to stop the discussion for today, and I really hope it's helped you understand more about how the eating disorder can interfere with your ability to connect with others and pursue higher needs. And I also hope it has helped you feel less alone and less like you're broken in the area of relationships. This whole topic comes up so much in coaching that in order to help people more effectively, I recently got certified as a relationship coach, and this is in addition to my certification in health coaching from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. So if you are having issues in relationships as you recover, it's definitely something I understand and something I can help guide you through in one-on-one coaching. And I also feel like I just have a lot of personal experience in this area, ranging from the issues related to the eating disorder and then later through a challenging marriage and parenting and divorce and co-parenting and dating and difficult relationships and breakups and healthy relationships as well. So it's really something I'm passionate about. And just like I always remind you that I do not eat perfectly, I also do not do relationships perfectly by any stretch of the imagination. But I have overcome some challenges in this area, and I have a capacity to listen without judgment and to help you work through your own unique issues. And this goes for Brain Over Binge coach Julie as well, who is certified in life coaching and can help you with so many other issues that may come up in your life or in your relationships as you're ending binge eating. You can find links to learn about one-on-one coaching and group coaching in the show description. Coach Julie and I also have a new option for one-on-one coaching called laser coaching. It's the same great support and guidance in a one-on-one session, but the laser sessions are 20 minutes as opposed to the full 45-minute sessions, and the laser sessions are also just audio. The laser sessions are so new that they're not on the Brain Over Binge website yet, but if you want to book one of these sessions for some quick help or to talk through a specific challenge that you're facing, the link to schedule with me or Coach Julie is in the show description. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to continuing this conversation in an episode in the near future. Wherever you are in recovery and wherever you are in your relationship with yourself and others, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey.